On my channel, I talk a lot about overconsumption, and I think that's my bread and butter. There's so much value to that, and critiquing and pushing back on not some of a lot of the buy this, buy all the time, new stuff to want mentality. I do think it's great to push back on that and to counter some of the things that we're actually seeing. But I also think it is equally important to talk about what to do. Not just don't buy this or avoid this, but what are some helpful things that we can actually do? And today we're going to have a bit of a discussion on just that. Today we're going to be talking about contentment, how it can be a guiding force in your life, but also how it can be a form of resistance. Let's first talk about what contentment actually is. My self definition is the appreciation of who you are, where you are, and what you have. I personally have found like if you were to Google contentment, you usually find something like satisfaction or happiness, kind of something like that. And I kind of found them to be wanting. And so I took a little bit of that and put just a little bit of my own twist on it. And it gave me something tangible to think about in terms of what contentment means to me. But also, I kind of feel like there's a little bit of action or things that you can go to within that mini definition. Happiness and contentment aren't the same thing. I have an entire video on this, I think two at this point, if you want to watch. The TLDR is that happiness is really about pleasure. And happiness typically comes from external sources, things outside of you. You also don't need to be intentional about cultivating happiness. You can, but happiness can also happen. And happiness, to be very clear, is highly pleasure based. Happiness is fleeting and it's typically not something to be sustained, and we experience it in moments. So we get spikes, but then we also get the come down. Contentment is more like sustained satisfaction. Contentment is more stable and typically comes from internal. You need to be typically more vigilant or more intentional about cultivating it. And really, I think comes from like internal alignment, typically like values based. And really, I think happens when we know ourselves. Just the idea of sustained satisfaction, I don't think is like a really sexy thing. It doesn't sound sexy anyway. It might not be sexy as a concept, but in practice, I think it's really sexy. Contentment is not the same as settling. That's one thing I hear a lot when I talk about contentment, or I hear other people talk about it. A lot of people feel as though it's a settling. It's not a laziness, and it's also not pretending like you don't want anything or that you don't want to grow or change. Contentment isn't about looking at your situation and saying, this is it. That's it. You could. I mean, that could be a good thing, but if it's a bad thing where you look at your surroundings and you go, this is it, then no, this is not the intention. Focusing on contentment, in my opinion, is a bit like appreciating wherever you are in life while you're there. It's about looking at your stuff in your life and saying and being able to acknowledge there's good here. And also, just personally, I think it's about acknowledging that things don't have to be perfect or things don't have to be fixed in order to enjoy it. To be somebody who focuses on contentment doesn't mean that you don't want to grow in life or you don't want to change in life. It's appreciating the process, appreciating while you're growing, and acknowledging and appreciating all of the moments along the way. And as I was mentioning, recognizing that there is still good here. But when it comes to stuff specifically, you're not measuring your life by your stuff. You're not measuring your success by how much money you have, how nice your stuff is, how much stuff you have. You stop measuring the goodness of your life by the stuff. I think in other respects, instead of asking what's missing, contentment asks what's working. Instead of chasing the next thing, contentment would ask us to reconnect with what you already have. The power of this was shown to me after my no buy year. So I go on a no buy year in 2020. You may have heard this story and you may have been along for this. So if so, you can go right on to the next section. I did my no buy year in 2020. Came out the other side and felt like, all right, I'm fixed. Did the thing, Good now. But I slipped back into old behavior really quickly. That year, like 2021, was a year of still wanting to shop, emotionally spending, and I just thought that I would be able to budget and not and just like be able to do it because I did the no buy year. I really struggled with not buying things. Even though I was doing better than I was before and there was progress, one, I wasn't fully acknowledging and seeing the process, but I also still was struggling to not buy stuff. The year of contentment for me was born out of this. So I wanted to make not buying things easier because I felt like I'm onto something here. I learned a lot in 2020 and via 2021 and struggled a lot, but I knew that like I don't want to be the kind of person that spends so much of my time and energy on stuff and shopping, but I just can't really seem to make not shopping. It still was difficult. So I said, okay, how about this? Instead of asking myself, how do I not buy a thing? How do I stop shopping? I decided to ask, what if instead I decided to appreciate what I have, to focus on all the good things and really focusing on the appreciation of it, finding ways to appreciate my stuff in my life. And I theorized, or I hypothesized that I'd probably have a really similar result. I'd probably buy less things if I focused on the good and gave it my all to appreciate my stuff. I'd probably be happier. I would probably buy less because I was able to acknowledge all of the good stuff in my life, but I also extended that to me and the life part. Like, your home is, yes, filled with stuff, but if you don't appreciate your home or if you don't appreciate your body, as an example, that can lend itself to buying out of insecurity or buying new things for your home because you're trying to upgrade it in some kind of way. Really, in fact, made shopping much easier. And whenever I personally slip out of that, because contentment is a skill and a habit, I see myself going back, and spending time and looking at things and wanting things. I have to rely so much more on like the willpower and the stop shopping strategies when if I'm just going about my life and really focusing on appreciating my stuff and like that being the peace and protecting that peace as much as possible, getting out all of the things that take away from that. It cuts out so much noise, oh my god. But it makes not shopping a much easier thing to do. Let's now talk about how contentment can be a form of resistance. We live in a culture or cultural moment that really relies on dissatisfaction. It's not always in overt ways and it's not always malicious, but we're constantly being shown new ways to improve ourselves. Our homes, our wardrobes, our skincare, our routine, but we're also presented with a lot of things to want, which when we're presented with a lot of things to want, we can feel deficiencies about the things we already have. It becomes so easy to see our current lives as somehow lacking and not good enough. This doesn't always come from comparison or watching advertisements. Sometimes it comes from our habits. Sometimes we're just used to wanting, we're just used to shopping. Shopping is familiar and craving is familiar. The idea of something new becomes a default response even if we're not looking at everything or everything is fine. Contentment, I feel like, is a bit more of a quiet resistance. It doesn't fight with force, but it's ultimately, in my opinion, a refusal. It's a refusal to participate in a system that constantly is trying to get us to be insecure about what we have, to be dissatisfied with our lives, and go to shopping to fix it, to go to shopping to improve ourselves in some way, or to find some kind of emotional satisfaction or contentment. Sorry, to find some emotional satisfaction or relief or release. We're refusing to be a part of a system that trains us to never feeling satisfied and never being done. Your home isn't good enough. It needs to be updated and refreshed, and your wardrobe isn't good enough. And there's new things that are coming out this season, or your kitchen could be more organized. Your body isn't right, or whatever. And if these things are, your kitchen's great, or your wardrobe's great, just wait. There's more new things around the corner. Sorry, I think this shirt is like really crinkling. Sometimes as well, we're just seeing people with newer things or things we don't have. They don't necessarily need to be new. We're seeing people with more aesthetic homes than us, the newest thing, the newest beauty launch, or more yarn than us. Sometimes it is comparison and manufacturer discontentedness, but also sometimes it's just seeing all the new stuff and being in the place of having the habits that keep us engaged with newness and novelty and stuff. Sometimes this messaging is overt through marketing and influencer content and advertising or curated content that sells us this version of what a happier, better life is. A lot of the time, though, it's subtle and shows up through repetition and exposure and social normalizations. You see something enough times and it stops feeling. This is why I talk so much about all of these things in together. All of the things and all of the messaging, and it's not just one TikTok account or one person shopping on Temu or Shein. It's the collective, and collective exposure or normalization turns things that used to be absurd or crazy into things that are normal. We compare our lives and our realities not just to a specific person, sometimes we do, but I think it's often comparing our lives and our stuff to this accumulation of images and lifestyles and this assumption based on them. It can make our current lives that we weren't feeling any kind of way about 5, 10 minutes ago or last week, all of a sudden it's not good enough. The infuriating thing about consumer culture is that you can go about your life just booping around in the world, going for a walk or drinking your matcha, feeling fine, normal, and then all of a sudden you see something. You watch one video of somebody making matcha in their kitchen, and maybe it's not the whack jar that gets you, maybe it's just their beautiful kitchen, and you start feeling shit about your kitchen or your coffee setup, and now you want to go and buy all of these things, or they show you this cool new products and you go, oh my God, I want that too. I don't have that. This is the context that contentment lives in. And choosing contentment within this context disrupts the cycle. It's our way of putting a proverbial wrench in in the cycle of saying, no, I'm not going to rely on habits. I'm not going to rely on impulse and instinct and gut reactions. I am actively going to choose otherwise. That I am enough, that my home, my body, my life, my stuff is actually enough. I don't need more to feel okay or happy. And that's incredibly important because the moment you decide your stuff in your life is actually enough and you don't need more things to be happy, you become harder to sell to. You're less responsive to urgency. You're less emotionally reactive. You are less in touch with trends. You're less reactive to scarcity tactics. You're not trying to constantly prove your value and your worth through your thing. Contentment and focusing on it resists the underlying belief, not only that you don't need more stuff to be happy or that a good life comes from having a specific set of things, but also that like happiness and identity aren't going to come from upgrades. These beliefs and other knee-jerk reactions, which can be kind of cemented or rooted in some of these beliefs, because I think like some of our engagement with consumer culture is coming from the belief that like nice stuff is wealth, or like having the money to be able to buy all of these things and to not go into debt to do it, that's wealth. These beliefs are what keep people in the cycles of consumption and spending money and shopping and self-comparing in ways that may be visible but often or sometimes aren't, and can be either way exhausting to participate in. I'm not saying that to be somebody who focuses on contentment means or that you shouldn't ever care about your home or your clothes or that it's wrong to care about them. I'm saying is that the way that you look at those things can shift when you focus on how great the stuff you already have is. Wait, I don't think there was an agreement there. When you appreciate the stuff in your life and you focus on how good it is and you focus on being satisfied in your life and tuning out and cutting out a lot of the stuff that detracts from that, the way you look at your stuff is different. but also really digging into what contentment means for you. There's a lot of like value stuff and living in alignment with your values that we're not touching on here. I talked about that at other points, and that's a further discussion. But I think, when I talk about this kind of thing, and I think it can in some people's minds connect to other concepts or ideas like simple living or slow living or minimalism, and maybe your practice of contentment connects to those things, but it doesn't inherently. Like, you don't need to live in some small town, some rural village with no connections to the outside world and no cell service in order to live a content life. You don't need to live in a specific place or have a specific job in order to do this. The goal is appreciation and appreciating your life and your stuff as it applies to you. And you can do that in small town Arkansas or high rise 40th floor apartment in Singapore. In case I haven't been clear so far, I want to be even more specific about how contentment is an act of resistance. Number one, contentment resists the commercialization of identity. We are constantly told, explicitly and implicitly, that who we are is not enough on its own, that we need to express our identity through products, clothes, skincare routines, home decor, and hobbies, arguably hobby supplies. Identity becomes something you build through purchases, not just how you look, but how you organize your kitchen, and not just how you dress, but how you curate your life. When you choose contentment, in my opinion, you are opting out of this, and you're kind of saying, I don't need to prove who I am by what I buy, and resist the idea that your worth as a person and your identity of a person isn't inherently, or primarily, I should say, or exclusively tied to the stuff you buy. There is a greater separation between identity and stuff. And yeah, stuff can be affirming, and parts of your identity can have a tie to stuff, but it's so important to nurture the parts of ourselves that are not stuff. And you are more than your stuff. Your identity comes from more than your stuff. And I think the overemphasizing on stuff and consumption has led a lot of people to ignoring those other amazing, awesome, and beautiful parts of ourselves. Number two, contentment resists the economy of dissatisfaction. Much of modern commerce relies on dissatisfaction, as we were talking about earlier. That your life would be better if you purchased something, you upgraded something. And that discomfort that you feel, whether that's inadequacy or not good enough, the way you resolve that feeling is by buying something. When you focus on contentment, you disrupt that. You stop responding to every discomfort with a purchase. And I think, at least just personally, I started seeing where I was feeling insecure and was like, okay, if I'm going to protect my peace and I'm going to protect my own happiness, I need to start resolving the emotional components of this. Like, why am I actually feeling this way? Am I actually discontent with my life or some element of this? Or like maybe something else was going on. Like maybe I had some kind of interaction that brought up feelings last week, and it's somewhat in the back of my mind, and then I come across this thing that is picking up on that insecurity. A big part of contentment as a priority, I think, is about protecting the peace and finding ways of doing that. Contentment resists the normalization of urgency and scarcity. So much of modern shopping culture, consumer culture, is built on that. These sales, the limited time deals, and the not just the limited time deals, but like the limited edition stuff. You're told that you have to act now or you'll miss out, which, drives the FOMO and the urgency to buy, and then we can buy impulsively. Contentment resists that pressure, or helps us to resist that pressure. We're going to talk about an example in just a little bit, of like how these things actually work, and it might help illuminate this a little bit more. Contentment resists the conflation of growth with accumulation. We're often told that growth, or maybe not told, but shown, growth is done with upgrading. By that, I mean you get a raise, you make more money, you buy a more expensive car. That owning more things, that owning more expensive things, that upgrading your life over time, a more expensive house, a more expensive car, more expensive clothes, things like that, those are wealth and success symbols and also things you should strive for. A better version of yourself means that. And this is a form of conspicuous consumption because how do people know that you're doing well unless you show them with stuff? That kind of thing. Contentment resists this by reprioritizing and, reshuffling what growth looks like. And then this leads into the last thing, which is contentment resists performative living. As I was just mentioning, a lot of what we buy isn't just for us, it's for other people to see. Shopping is often part of public self construction. We buy to post the thing, we buy to fit in, we buy to signal to others that we're doing okay or doing well in life. Contentment means that, you're tuning out the things and some of those pressures. And if you don't know how to tune them out, you learn to do so. I'm not saying that it's easy, but if this is something that you care about, you start to wonder and be like, okay, how do I resist this? What's going on here? And we become more comfortable with living our lives for ourselves or living for outside validation. So, focusing on contentment can lead to many great benefits, like changing your internal narrative. Instead of constantly thinking about things like, I'm falling behind. If I had that, I would feel better. Other people have nicer things. Other people have more things. Other people have a nicer life than I do. My life is shit. I don't have nice things. I should probably upgrade this. I need a newer version of this. Those thoughts aren't always conscious, but they can guide a lot of our decisions. Focusing on contentment can help rewrite that internal narrative, how we actually, in our heads, think about our life and our stuff. This is going to take some active work to do. And by that, I mean when you're actively thinking about what's working, what's supporting you, what already brings you value, you begin to enough the not enough loop and you stop thinking about the not enough and you start thinking more about the good enough. And over time, when practiced enough, this stops the defaulting back to that not good enough comparison. And also, I think this is my personal opinion, that once you start seeing how, or once you start feeling how good it is to feel this way, you can start loving how that feels. And then when you tap into content or you come across content or something or marketing or whatever, or maybe you encounter a real person and you're like, oh, this feels kind of shit. You can become more vigilant about protecting your peace and cut out some of those things. I'm not saying you can't cut out everybody, but I think we can become more conscious of the things that disrupt and contribute to that negative narrative. It can help reduce our reaction time to buying things, more on this in our example. It also can help us redefine our values. And I think some of this, again, happens with okay, I want to love on and appreciate my stuff. How do I do that? How do I make that as easy to do as possible? So, in that, protecting the peace and protecting that mindset, we need to find ways, to do that. So, instead of asking, is this trending? Is this popular? We can start asking, will I use this? Do I have something I could use already? This undermines the effectiveness of aspirational marketing, which depends on you and me believing that a better version of your life is purchasable. By finding value in what you already have, whether it's your clothes, your space, or your body, you stop needing consumption to affirm your worth and identity. Lastly, it reduces emotional activity. A huge, huge part of why people buy things is the emotional component of it. Being bored, anxious, insecure, or, other things, stressed, or even, the positives. Contentment can help build emotional resilience because if you get used to fighting those insecurities and not turning an insecurity or an emotion into a purchase, this arguably may need some help from a professional. So regardless if you do it alone or with a professional, you get more comfortable sitting with the discomfort, going to other things for the discomfort. And then I think if you were able to build a track record, you go, oh, I'm actually fine. And buying a new thing isn't going to fix my insecurity about my hair or my shoulders. Or, buying a new blazer isn't going to actually make me see myself as more serious or more professional or give me confidence. I'm not trying to say that focusing on contentment is just automatically going to change your life and it's not going to require any work. I think you discover along the way what you specifically need and what will benefit you. And you may need some help from a professional. I'm not trying to say that you focus on contentment. And if you are somebody who has a shopping addiction, that like you're just cured like that. I just think that it can help illuminate some of the things around us that challenge our own satisfaction with our life and our stuff. And then it can also pinpoint ways like to deal with those challenges and also makes not shopping easier and enjoying our life easier. So, I want to kind of take an example to showcase a little bit about what I mean. And it's one that, like, hopefully is relevant to you. And if it's not totally relevant, you kind of see where I'm going with this. Okay. So, in this scenario, fall's coming up. I mean, it's not too far down the line, so it's not totally out of pocket. But it's like maybe a little bit far at this point. Anyway, fall's coming up and you love fall. And fall is when your shopping itches kick in because you love and you typically buy a lot of clothes and home goods in the fall. You might scroll through Pinterest and start looking at all the fall things, or look at outfit inspiration videos and lookbook videos on YouTube, or watch the Target hauls. You start building a mental list of things to buy and you start putting new things in your face to want. That's the normal behavior. So here is how, in my opinion, somebody who's like contentment focused, how this might change. So instead of asking, what should I buy this year? Or what's new this year? Or what's great or trending this year? You ask, what are some great things that I already have for fall? Or what do I already love wearing in fall? You might take 10 minutes, open your closet or open your drawers, not to declutter, not to create a mental list of things to buy where you're lacking, but to go and like touch and physically see the beautiful things you have for fall. Maybe you try them on and maybe you play with some outfits. The intention is about noticing the great things. And like these are your things that you wear for fall. Maybe noticing what makes you feel good or what colors you really like. This is a way of shifting your focus from lack or what you don't have to value. Instead of the look at all the things I don't have, look at all the things I could have, to look at all the wonderful things I already have. So instead of automatically assuming you're going to create a shopping list, maybe instead you start with a theme. Maybe it's color and really focusing on the pieces that you have that are autumnal, that give you really like fall colors. Maybe you recreate old outfits or wear old favorite pieces. You can experiment with color layering or color blocking or color combinations. Instead of looking for things to buy, you can look for ways to combine things you already have. Looking at maybe color combinations or outfit combinations of things that you already own. So, like, if you don't own straight leg pants and you only own skinny leg jeans or skinny pants, watching the straight leg pants video may be appropriate for you depending on the person, but maybe not. And maybe just give you the FOMO and you want to go buy straight leg pants. So you find inspiration that is directly intended to use what you have. Maybe you take some screenshots, but all of this with the goal of shopping your own closet and using as inspiration for your own stuff instead of inspiration to create a shopping list. You are not getting into the comparison of my closet isn't good enough. Where can I get that? Or using, or kind of going with the more traditional sense of inspiration leading to purchasing or inspiration leading to aspiration. However, if you feel yourself comparing, because I myself do this, and sometimes all I can see is deficiency, maybe that's not the season for doing that. Maybe we just, put a pin in it. And maybe what we really need are other forms of inspiration that maybe aren't clothes. Let's say you feel pulled towards something specific. You're like, you know what? I would really like or benefit from a new jacket this fall. Contentment doesn't say, oh, no, no, you're not allowed to buy it. You're actually not allowed to buy anything. Contentment, I think, in this sense, can be misunderstood as having no desire and buying nothing. No. In my opinion, contentment is about being anchored enough in your present life that you can engage with desire without being consumed by it. You have the clarity or the ability to notice things without it immediately turning to desire or without immediately chasing it. Sometimes it leads to desire, but having desire and not chase it and be consumed by it. So, to talk more about this kind of acquisition element of it, because I think this is really important to that might help give some context. If you were operating from a place of lack, you might feel urgency. By that, I mean the desire for the new thing can make you feel like you need to rectify it immediately. And it would feel urgent or something you immediately need to do something about because your happiness in that area of your life or your identity, it depends on that. When you have a peaceful relationship with desire, you aren't like clutching and grasping onto it. You're not panicking when you desire something. Your life is not unhappy and you're not discontent because you don't have that thing. Your wardrobe is not incomplete and you're just it sucks without that thing. You can say, I want this. You can acknowledge that you want this, but your life and your happiness is okay if you don't buy it. I do think that that takes practice and there's a negotiation maybe happening there. Can't think of the word on the top of my head. It's not like I personally am not satisfied or content at every moment of my life because contentment is a habit. And sometimes I participate in things that challenge my own ability to be content with my life and my stuff. And then I feel those feelings and I feel comparison and I feel kind of shitty. And when I remove them and I get back to practicing that contentment, I do feel some more of that peace. But at the same time, even when those messaging and those feelings come up, I do feel like I'm able to say, okay, that's great. I know that I'm feeling compare and despair right now. That's fine. I know it's gonna pass. To continue, in a discontented state, most wants are reactive. You want something because you saw it, because someone else had it, or because you're trying to feel discomfort you don't want to feel. The focus on contentment gives space to ask, is this aligned with what I care about? Does this support how I want to live? Am I trying to fix something this object can't actually fix? By filtering desire through our values, we're not just consuming, we are choosing. That's a slower, more intentional relationship with what we bring into our life. And that's a hallmark of contentment, making a choice from alignment and not insecurity. Desiring things and wanting things isn't a problem, it's the reactivity and the way we respond to the desire that's the problem. Focusing on contentment doesn't erase desire. I think it just helps us hold perspective about that desire and not coveting things out of this place of lack. So that's everything for me today. And I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope this video makes sense. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And I hope you enjoyed it. So thanks for watching and hope to see you again around here soon for a new video. Bye.